Former Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich has a lot of explaining to do after the release of new documents that show his investigation into the 2020 election found no evidence of widespread fraud or malfeasance.
When you are in possession of information that would have been critical to pouring water on the flames of conspiracy, that water should have been poured.
Current Attorney General Chris Mays tells us her office recently found evidence that shows Brnovich was well aware of the fact there was no big conspiracy or elaborate scheme to influence the 2020 election, yet refused to release those findings to the public.
We have a duty, a solemn duty at the Attorney General's office to be honest and transparent with the people of Arizona about everything that we do, and especially when it comes to democracy and elections.
According to the just released documents, the AG's office staff under Brnovich spent more than 10,000 hours investigating voting irregularities and alleged instances of illegal voting. They found complaints and allegations from the public were overwhelmingly unsupported by factual evidence.
The buck stops with the elected official.
Secretary of State Adrian Fontes says what Brnovich reportedly did chips away at the public's trust.
Well, I knew he was a coward, but I didn't think he was this big of a coward, just to keep this information from folks for his own political purposes. And then even after he lost the primary, to lie and misrepresent the information that was in these reports, it's unconscionable.
Questions have now been raised about whether Brnovich can be held accountable and whether he could lose his license to practice law. Hayes is hoping that by exposing what happened, it will show Arizona voters the truth about how our elections are run.
I hope they'll look at the fact that we had 60 trained law enforcement officers that at one point or another worked on this case and came to the conclusion that there was no fraud in the 2020 election.
Now, just a short time ago, we received this statement from Brnovich. It said, "I am proud of the work our office did with the election integrity unit that was created by the Arizona legislature. While subjected to severe criticism from all sides of the political spectrum during the course of our investigations, we did our due diligence to run all complaints to ground. Where we were able to debunk rumors and conspiracies, we did so. Nevertheless, we also identified areas we believe the legislature and county officials should address to ensure confidence in future elections." So far, we have not heard of any formal complaints being filed with the State Bar Association against Brnovich. If anything changes, we'll let you know. Reporting live in Phoenix, Jason Berry for Arizona's Family.
Yeah, that statement sidesteps the question as to why he didn't release the results after they spent 10,000 hours on that investigation. Jason, thanks so much.